One of the things I loved doing as a kid was join the dot pictures. In fact, if I have to admit it to you, I still enjoy doing them. I love the fact that I could make a few short lines on a page, join up some numbers in the right order, and eventually a beautiful image would emerge. As many of you may or may not know, I'm no artist and I can't really draw very well. But hey, what I loved was that I could just go through some steps, and eventually even straight lines became curves, and eventually those lines became an image that I could understand. Today I wanted to unpack the concept of how our habits form lines or rhythms in our lives. If we get the wrong habits in the wrong order, we very quickly find ourselves out of rhythm, and as a result, the picture of our life isn't that very clear. Purpose is what brings clarity to the picture of our life. And we need to understand that all of our rhythms are leading towards a purpose, but we also need to understand that all of our habits are leading towards a rhythm, which leads to that purpose. And so if we want to achieve getting to our purpose in life, we want to feel like we're making an impact in life, if we want to feel like we're growing and getting better at whatever we put our minds to, we need to understand that we need to get our rhythms in order. And to be able to get rhythms in order, we need to put the right habits in the right order in our lives so that those rhythms can become grooved and they can become reality and they can lead towards our purpose. One of the things I've often heard said is that we really end up somewhere based on one or two small bad decisions. It's the repeated decisions that we make that eventually become the rhythm, and the rhythm either leads to our demise or towards our purpose. And so when we have a look at the small little dots that join up our rhythms, we need to understand that not only do we need to be looking at habits and converting them from bad habits to good habits, we also need to get the habits in the right order. You know, it's very often said that, just get some good habits and you'll eventually get where you want to go. But I can put good habits in the wrong order and still get nowhere. If I don't have that habit of putting toothpaste on my toothbrush before I put the toothbrush in my mouth every morning, I'm never going to get really clean teeth. I'm never going to have the rhythm of good dental hygiene. I'm going to have to get the habits in the right order for there to be a good rhythm, for the rhythm to have a purpose and meaning in my life. But you see, we really have to understand that even our habits, even though they are 2 or 3 tiers removed from our purpose, we always have a desired outcome that we need to have a look at our habits through the lens of. What is this habit going to produce in my life? I need to study the habit. I need to understand the habit. I need to know that habit number 1 has consequence of number 2, number 3, number 4 in my life. And so if the habit is going to propel me through the dots and it's going to allow me to draw a nice long line, it's not just going to get me to point number 2 and then I'm going to get stuck because I have to go back to point number 1 and then go back to point number 2, and this habit in my life just gets me into a vicious circle. If a habit in my life is going to propel other good habits into my life, then I need to do them because that propulsion creates a rhythm, and that rhythm creates purpose. So when we have a look at the Bible even comes up with a concept in this regard, and that's in the first chapter of James, when it says get rid of bad habits and get into the good habit of realizing what God has placed in your heart. And get out of the bad habits that are going to rob you of your purpose and get into the good habits that are going to give you a good rhythm in life, which is going to eventually get you to walking out what God has placed in your heart. Good habits start out very more, or in a little bit more difficulty. To get into a good habit, it's a whole lot more difficult than getting into a bad habit. We usually struggle to get into good habits because the payoff is some time in the future. We struggle to start and stick to a diet, the habit of dieting and eating well, because our weight loss is only going to be realized in a couple of years later. Whereas bad habits are slightly different. There's an immediate perceived benefit, like right now, I can get this right now if I just do this. So what we do is, even though it's a bad habit, we justify the bad habit because it has an immediate return. And we think we need that immediate return. So our mind is telling us that a bad habit is actually a good habit because it's going to get us what we need right now. But getting us to where we need right now is like putting our pen on the first dot and going no further. I've got the pen on the page. I've got ink on the page. Hey, I'm making steps forward. No, I'm not. I've perceived that the immediate benefit is better than the long-term benefit of completing the picture. The immediate benefit, I got pen on paper. The long-term benefit is not realized because we haven't defined good habits that propel us forward onto greater habits, which propel us forward onto good rhythms, which eventually deliver us to our purpose. The best way of having a look at whether or not our habits are propelling us forward or keeping us trapped. A bad habit will keep you trapped. A good habit will propel you through the dots to create a rhythm. Good habits will rob us of time. Bad habits will rob us of time, will rob us of energy, will rob us of focus. Bad habits will get us more stressed, will get us feeling guilty, will get us feeling ashamed, and so the list goes on. You know what I'm talking about. You know the feeling that you have in your heart when you've performed a bad dot change or a dot drawing or a habit in your life. You know what it looks like when you look at the picture. You know it's not quite right. You know that you could be in better rhythms by building up better habits. And so you know what I'm talking about when I say bad habits. They don't get me up in the morning. They don't propel me forward. They're just a means to an immediate end that I think is good, so I convince myself that my bad habits are actually good habits. That's called justification, and justification will never ever help you grow to complete the picture that God has placed in your heart. So what do we need to do? We need to acknowledge when we have a bad habit. We need to have a look at that and say, hey, is this thing got good long-term rhythmic knock-on in my life? Or is it stopping me? Is it keeping me trapped? Is that cigarette that I think I have to take the edge of my nerves off right now really going to propel me towards the long-term goal of having good health, of having a better life, of being more aware, of being more vibrant in my life? Well, if you can't see a long-term good knock-on effect from your habit, know that it's not knocking you from dot number 1 to dot number 2 to dot number 3, and you're never going to see the curves and nuances of good rhythms in your life leading to walking out your purpose. So here's how you can kick some bad habits once you've acknowledged and identified them. The first is, you know what? You are in a habit loop. You may very well be not even aware of some habits, but once you've drawn attention to it, they understand that your mind is in a loop. There's a trigger to action, action to trigger, trigger to action loop going on in your head. I need this, so I do this. When I do this, I need that more, so I do it again. And I just keep going round and round in a bad habit circle. You see, good habits propel you forward, linear. Bad habits get you trapped in a loop. Habits that are bad will constantly be triggered by something in your mind. And to be able to kick the loop, you've got to understand the triggers. What kind of triggers happen in our habitual life? Well, you might sometimes smell something that just kicks off a habit. You might get into a situation that kicks off a bad habit. Whenever you're in a bad situation, you smoke a cigarette because you're stressed. Whenever you're in a bad situation, you attack because you need to defend yourself. You get into a situation. Habit triggers, bad habit triggers, are always enforced by external forces on you, external influences on you. Place, time, mood, moments, people. These are all triggers that happen to you. One of the things that I've noticed about these influences or these triggers of my habits is that for the most part, external influences trigger bad habits. Internal influences trigger good ones. What do I mean by external influences? Well, you might walk into a place and catch a smell of freshly baked bread and there goes your diet. You might walk into a room where there's a certain person that always pulls out that language in you, or you drink a little bit too much when you're around that person. External influences tend to pull us out of rhythm and get back into bad habits. But when we can seriously apply what we know about ourselves, what we can understand about our purpose, what we can really visualize in our dreams, the things that come from what God is doing on the inside of us, when we can use those things as our influences, influence from within, I usually find that gets me to a place of good habits. I want to read my Bible because of what God has done for me. I want to walk out growth and learning in my life because of what God has destined for me. You see, when I start to allow external influences to adjudicate how I behave, they usually become bad habits. But when I allow what God has done on the inside of me to be my motivator, they usually become good habits. Remember, bad habits propel us into a loop. Good habits get us moving forward into a rhythm that can help us realize our purpose. Why don't you ask yourself some questions today? Why do I do that whenever this or that happens? Why is it that I automatically default to this behavior at this time of day? Why do I get hungry then and not then? What's happening externally that's triggering bad habits? And hey, what are some of the things inside of me, my dreams, my visions, the things I'd like to achieve? What are some of the things and motivations that I can use inside of me to start having good habits that propel me through the drawing from one dot to the next until eventually the straight lines become curves, the curves become the drawing, and as a result of the drawing, I start to see the picture of my purpose in my life. It all starts with converting your bad habits to good ones. Be sure to tune in again next time when we're going to be discussing how we do that. How do we pick up on the motivations of bad habits in our lives and convert them to good motivations, into good habits, into good rhythms, and into walking out our purpose. See you again soon.